it looks like we've got 47 classes in now. So everybody's very excited to see our tour today on cattle and cactus. I'm very excited to be here with all of you again. For those of you who are new, my name is Katie Akins, and I'm with the Arizona Farm Bureau Agriculture in the Classroom program. And each month we strive to bring you engaging tours, introducing you to agriculture throughout the state. So sometimes it's farmers, sometimes it's ranchers, sometimes it's agribusinesses, but things that we think you would be interested in, and more importantly, things that we think everyone should know is happening in our wonderful state of Arizona. So again, today is all about cattle and cactus, and I am pleased that we are joined today with Stefanie Smallhouse of Carlink Ranch. She's waving in the corner. Hopefully she's spotlighted. You guys can see her there. A couple of just quick housekeeping things. Remember, we cannot hear you. So if you have a question, can you please type that in the chat box? And we will be sure to ask Stefanie the question that you have as soon as you have it. So again, just go ahead and type those questions in the chat box, and we will get to those. This is going to be about 45 minutes. So we will have a recording of it. It is being recorded. So at the end, we will send out the recording in case you missed any of it. So again, questions go into the chat box. Today's tour is a little bit different than some in the past. It is a hybrid tour. I'm sure you are all tired of hearing that word. But the reason why it's hybrid is, as you will learn, Miss Smallhouse and her family live in a very remote location, and our connectivity is not always ideal. And so to eliminate missing her ranch and her message, we went ahead and filmed some parts, but as you can see, she is online with us here to answer questions and to also elaborate on the things that you are going to see. So welcome again to our Arizona Farm Bureau Ag in the Classroom virtual ag tour of Carlink Ranch.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Smallhouse. My husband and I own and operate the Carlink Ranch, and that's where you are today. We're in Reddington, Arizona. Now, most of you probably don't know where Reddington, Arizona is. It's a very small little town, almost a ghost town nowadays, but we're down by Tucson in southeastern Arizona, and we've been here since 1884. That's a long time. It's over 130 years. My son, who you'll see today on the tour, working some cattle, is the 6th generation to live and work on this very ranch. So where we're standing this morning is our old corrals. These have been here for 100 years. Lots of patchwork here and there. Some of our animals are behind us here, some of our steers. Now this is where sometimes our sick cattle come and we treat them until they get better, or sometimes we feed out cattle here for the beef that we sell directly to consumers. People that want to buy beef directly from us come from these feed pens here. So we do a lot of different things on the ranch here. Takes a lot of different work to keep a ranch going for so many years. You have to do a lot of different things. So today you're going to see our farms. And what we grow on those farms, we grow oats, alfalfa, and sorghum. All of that is to feed our animals or to feed other people's animals. We don't grow any food crops here for people necessarily to eat directly. So you'll see that on the farms. We also mill mesquite lumber. So the trees that we have on this ranch are hundreds of years old. And so when they die off, we'll go out and we'll harvest those trees, and then we make mesquite lumber out of it. And people use that lumber to make furniture, fancy tables, cabinets, flooring. It's beautiful wood. And so that's something else in terms of resources that we harvest off the ranch and that we use and we sell to other people and make use of. And it's renewable. More trees grow up, we cut them, and we mill them. So we grow mesquite lumber. The cactus, you're going to see our cactus today here on the ranch. We grow Saguaro Cactuses from seed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when you see the cactuses, and we're going to go see the nursery. So that'll be super exciting because we're the only one in the whole state of Arizona, and Saguaro Cactus only grow in Arizona, and they only grow in a certain part of Arizona, these type of Saguaro Cactus. So what you're going to get to see today is super special. So we've got the cactus, we've got the cattle. We'll talk a little bit more about the cattle. When you see the cattle, you're going to get to be in the corrals and see us working cattle, and we'll talk about the kind of cattle we raise, English cross cattle. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And let's see, what else do we do here? We've got several families that live here on the ranch. Everybody that works here has to live here because we live so far away from town. And so we have lots of houses here for our workers, and we supply them with beef year round. And so they work here, and some of them farm, and some of them work the cattle. So I'm so happy you're here today, and I look forward to showing you everything that we do here. It's super exciting. We love our lives, and we love where we live. And hopefully you'll get to see kind of the rangeland that surrounds the ranch. And we'll talk about how we move our cattle from the range to the farms, and we rotate them to better manage our seeds. So thank you for coming today, and I look forward to showing you around.
Awesome. So now I would like to introduce to you Ms. Stefanie Smallhouse. She should be pinned for you guys to see her as we go through today. If you're having a problem, again, just put it in the chat box. So again, Stefanie, welcome.
Good morning, Katie, and good morning, everyone who is on this Zoom call. This is so much fun to do stuff like this. Never done it before. Some of you I can see maybe are at your home, and some of you maybe are in classrooms. So you got to see our ranch, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we do here. So you can see on this picture, this talks a little bit about how it works to raise beef and raise cattle. So I'll tell you that on the ranch, we have different types of cattle. So we have cows, those are the females, and those are the mamas. We have bulls, those are the males, and those are like the dads. And then all of our calves, which are the babies, right? So when we have the babies, they're either bull calves or they're little heifer calves. So the heifers are little female calves. And then most of the bulls, we castrate those and they become steers. And so those are little steer calves. And so all of the cattle that we raise here on the ranch are born here. So some ranches, they'll raise other people's cattle, or they'll buy cattle from somewhere else and bring them onto their ranch. But on our ranch, all of the cattle that we raise were born here with our cows and bulls. We feed them grass until out on the rangeland, and I think you'll be able to see the range in some of the pictures, but we feed them grass until they're about 500 or 600 pounds. That is really heavy. I mean, can you imagine? That's not even as heavy as they get. So they stay here on the Carlink Ranch until they get to about 500 or 600 pounds, and that's 8 or 9 months old. And so then after that, we sell them to someone else who then takes all of them and puts them in a feedlot. So up until now, they've just eaten a lot of grass, right? They've been out on the rangeland in the mountains and the fields, and they've eaten a lot of grass. So then they go to a feedlot, and in the feedlot, they eat a lot of corn and grain, and that makes them get fatter faster. And it also adds flavor to the meat so that when you eat a hamburger, it tastes really juicy and good. A lot of that comes from the corn and the grain that they eat. So they stay at the feedlot until they're 1,300 pounds. That is really heavy. Once they get fed to that weight, then they end up going to a processing facility, or what we call either like a slaughterhouse or something like that. And that's when the animals basically are processed for the meat that you buy in the grocery store. So one thing I really want you to understand is that when you go to McDonald's or when your parents make you a hamburger, it takes over 2 years for that hamburger to basically be made. From the time that animal is born to the time that it is made into a hamburger in McDonald's, it takes over 2 years. So that's a lot of people doing a lot of work for something that might only cost 99 cents, which is crazy. Sometimes we don't sell them. Sometimes, as you saw in the picture, those steers that were in the background in the corrals, sometimes we hold on to them and we feed them ourselves. And so we have them out on the grass, we wean them from their mamas. And so that's kind of like when you were a baby and you stopped drinking milk. Well, cows are the same way. After a while, they don't need the mom's milk anymore. And so we wean them off of their mom. And then we feed them corn and grain for a long time until we process them. And then we sell them directly to, like, your mom or dad could come to the ranch and they could buy boxes of beef that we have processed and sold them directly. So that's something we also do. One other thing I want to talk about with this picture, and then we'll move on because this is probably getting boring, is we rotate our cattle, right? So we have mountains all around us. We live in a river valley, and then we have mountains all around us. And so when we put the cattle out on the range with the mountains, they're eating grass, right? So we have to manage that. We have to make sure they don't eat too much grass, because if they eat a grass plant down too low, then that grass won't produce a seed the next year. And remember, when you learn about plants, they always have to produce a seed to grow again. And so we only leave our cattle out on the range for so long, and then we bring them onto the fields, which you'll see later in the video. And so that helps us manage all of those grasses so that they keep growing. So this is a picture of my son. So the day that Katie was out there, he was actually on break, and he was working cattle with our family, because we're a family business and everybody contributes. And so he was in the corral that day. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the tools of a cowboy and all the things we have to use on the ranching part of our farm and ranch to raise these cattle for you guys so that you have something to eat. So that's my son, Johnny, and he's only 13 years old. And he already knows how to drive and do lots of things on the ranch that maybe some people don't know how to do until they get older. So I think the next picture is a picture of Johnny's horse. Let's see. Oh, not quite yet. So these little baby calves that you're seeing on the left-hand side, those are just born. Those calves are only maybe a month or a month and a half old, and they're so cute little babies. My husband is in the picture that you see on the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and he runs the whole ranch and the whole farm. He's the boss. And so what he's doing right now is he's putting medicine in a syringe that's called a vaccination. So we hear a lot about vaccinations right now, right? With COVID-19 and everybody getting their vaccination. And then you got vaccinations before you were allowed to go to school for different things like the measles. And so our calves, it's the same thing. We give them vaccinations when they're very small to keep them from getting different diseases and getting sick. And so our foreman, who's on the ground there, he and Andy are putting those shots together. The picture down below is a picture of a loading chute, and you'll see my son, he's actually on the other side. You can barely see him, and he's running the gate that goes up and down. And so what we do is we run the cattle through kind of an alleyway or a hallway, and they go into this loading chute. And then we squeeze the loading chute down. It doesn't hurt the calves, it just holds them in place. And one thing about cattle is they like to feel secure, and they like to know what's going on around them. And they like to feel like they're calm and secure. And so when they go into the loading chute and it squeezes down on them, their head's sticking out the other end. And that allows us to brand them, put an ear tag, vaccinate them, do lots of things, and it keeps them calm. And so it keeps them safe from hurting themselves, and it keeps us safe from getting kicked.
Stephanie, one of the students asked, is it like the cows are getting a hug?
Yeah, it is sort of like a hug. It's like you're holding on to them tight and just saying, just calm down, just stay calm. And then we just give them a quick shot. Like when you were in the doctor's office and your parents sat with you and said, it's okay. And a quick shot, and it all happens pretty fast. So this is another picture from just the other day. And so you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, that's the ice chest, because we have to keep the medicines cold. We have to handle all of our medicine properly. So we have to know a lot about medicine. If you're a rancher, there are lots of things you have to know about. And one of them is being like a vet and knowing about medicines. And so my son is in the corner. He's giving one of the shots. We've already put an ear tag in. So those ear tags, let me tell you what those are for. It's like an earring, right? If you have your ears pierced and the person went, it's the same thing, except we put a tag in and it stays there. And so what that tag does is it helps us to know when that animal was born. Sometimes it helps us to know who its mama was. And that way we can keep records. So we keep lots of information about who got what shot, when they got the shot, if they were sick, why they were sick, and we keep track of all of these things. And so when animals are sick, we have to give them antibiotics, just like you get at the doctor, like penicillin and lots of things like that. So we keep track of those things with the ear tags. On the fence there, you'll see shaps hanging there. Those are kind of actually what we call chinks. They're shorter, and those were my son's. He was wearing those days. So when you ranch in the desert, lots of prickly things, right? Lots of things to poke you and tear at you. And so our cowboys, when they gather cattle out in the mountains, they have to wear things on their legs. So when the horses run through the brush, they don't get all beat up. And so that's an important tool that we use. So this was Johnny's horse here. Actually, that's not Johnny's horse. That's Mo's horse. I made a mistake. But horses are super important to us here on the ranch, right? They're like our partners, because it's really hard to go up in the mountains and find cattle because there's not roads everywhere, right? You have to be able to go where there's no roads. And so horses are very important to us on the ranch. And so every cowboy has their own horse, and they take care of them, and they change their shoes, and they make sure they're healthy, and they have everything that they need. They're like VIPs on the ranch. And so you'll see lots of different tools there. You'll see basically a canteen, very important when you work on a ranch to always have water with you all the time, especially in the summer. You'll see a rope up there on the saddle horn. We use ropes a lot for lots of things, tie up gates, help us catch the cattle, fix things when you don't have anything else. And then you'll see all of the gear that the horse has to wear to keep the horse safe too, and to make it comfortable. On the right-hand side, you can actually see our cowboys in the corral, and they're moving the cattle around. And so before we brand and we do all of those things that we were talking about in terms of putting the tags and giving them the shots, we have to sort through them because certain animals get certain things and other animals don't. And we have to make sure on the really baby calves that we don't lose track of their mamas, because after we put the ear tag in, we give them back to their mama. The big calves we separate off because they don't need their moms anymore.
Systems. This is a center pivot. It moves in a big circle all the way around this field, and it's highly efficient. So the water comes out of these little nozzles over here. Water comes out of these nozzles here, and so the nozzles are set at different heights above the ground to make sure that the water doesn't spread out a lot. It gets right down on the plant absorbs it, and we don't waste very much water because we live in the desert. And so we have different irrigation systems here on the farm, but this is the most efficient. They cost a lot of money, and so sometimes it takes a long time to switch all of our irrigation over to these systems. But we've done a lot on the farm because it's important for us to save water. So what's growing in this field right now is sorghum, and it was just planted not that long ago. We have cattle in here right now because sometimes we feed cattle in the fields as we grow the crops. So when you go to a vegetable farm or a farm that's growing cotton or even a farm that's growing alfalfa, you won't see cattle in the fields because they have to keep their fields very clean without any weeds. Whereas here on the ranch, we don't worry quite as much about weeds because we feed our cattle all of the things that we grow. And so on a ranch, you'll often see cattle in the farm fields, where that's definitely not something you would see on a cotton farm or a vegetable farm. So this
Stephanie, is there anything else you want to say on the water before I play this next video?
No, I think we'll just go ahead and go to the cactus unless anybody has any questions for me.
I don't see any yet, but if they pop up, I'll stream them through.
Okay.
So this is something very unique on the ranch. I mentioned it before when you first got here. This is the Saguaro Farm, basically, on the Carlink Ranch. And so, like I said, Saguaro Cactus, they only grow in the Sonora Desert, And right here where we are on the Carlink Ranch is the very most southern end of their range for the Saguaro cactus. Now there's thousands of cactus on the Carlink Ranch. And some of them, like this really big one that I'm standing next to, they've been alive for 100 years or so. You just never know. But these are the ones that we plant. These are the ones that we've started. And it takes a really long time to grow a saguaro cactus. So we'll walk through the greenhouses and you'll get to see those little cactus and how they start out. But once they get to a certain size, we move them outside. And then they're planted more like a row crop. So you can see on the ground here, there's these pipes going along, and that's sort of a drip irrigation system. So obviously, cactus are one of the best things to grow in the desert because you don't need a lot of water, but they're very finicky. Cactus get upset about anything. Too much water, too little water, soil's not right, too much fertilization, not enough. They're very sensitive to bugs. So sometimes it's sort of amazing that they live here at all. But these cactus will wait until they get to about here on me. Once they're about to here, they're about 3 feet tall. That's when they can be sold. When we sell the cactus, they go all sorts of places where they can still survive, right? So they could go to a new apartment building in Tucson. We've had a cactus that's gone to the Capitol in Phoenix. So one of our cactus is there. But most of the time they go to people's houses or they go to new businesses. So once they get to that size, we sell them. Now, how long does it take for a cactus to get from a little tiny seed to about this size? A really long time, it turns out. Even when you're watering it, it takes about 12 years. So this is really a long time project for us here on the ranch. Now out in the wild, it could take them 12 years just to get that tall. So it definitely helps to add water and manage the soils like we do here. But we've got several acres here of saguaros planted. And so you can see all of the different sizes. So we plant from seed every year, and then we bump them into the ground every year. So it's a little bit like growing Christmas trees. Every year you have a new crop, and you wait until your old crop gets to the right size, and then you harvest them. So this is a renewable resource in Arizona because we can always replace the ones that we've harvested off the rangeland with these that we're growing on the farm.
So before you get to the next slide, Stephanie, we have one question that says, does it take 2 years to let it grow? So,
well, it takes a long time no matter what. And cactus are they're very different. So every cactus is almost like a different person, right? Because they have different things that make them up, right? Different genes, it's a different recipe for each person, just like it is for cactus. So some cactus grow faster than others, just like some people grow faster than others. And so we start growing the cactus, and you'll see in some of the pictures from little tiny seeds. A poppy seed is like what's on top of your bagel. If any of you eat bagels with poppy seeds, that's how big a saguaro seed is. And so when we start a saguaro seed in 2 years, most of the time in 2 years, when we start it from seed and we're watering it, not nature, it still takes about 2 years just for it to get a couple of inches tall. So it takes a long time for a saguaro. Out in the wild, it could take them 2 years just to break the surface of the ground if they're not getting very much water.
we have another question that they might see here in a couple of slides, but what is the largest cactus on your farm, if you had to guess?
Well, the largest cactus on our farm that we have actually grown is probably about 3.5 feet tall. And that, like I said, has taken about 12 or 13 years. But the largest cactus that's on the ranch that's been there naturally growing there, I would say probably 40 feet tall, maybe. And of course, I haven't seen all of the cactus that are on the ranch because there's thousands of them. But we have some really old cactus that are very tall, and they can get to be, 30 to 50 feet tall. It just depends on where they're at. So.
And then we had another question. One, how many cactuses do you have on your cactus growing operation? So obviously there's more on the ranch. So how many total do you have kind of here in the greenhouses and here outside? And then a second part to that is Miss McDonald's class would like to know, why do you need to harvest so many cactus?
Great questions. So the first question, not counting the cactus that are in the little seedlings, right? The ones that are only, if you can see my picture, I don't know how many of you can, but little seedlings only about that big, the tip of my pinky, right? So not counting those, we have over 100,000 cactus that are either in pots in the greenhouse, which you'll see, or in the ground. So lots of cactus. Now, next question, why do we need to grow these cactus? So the reason we grow these cactus is, one, because we need something to grow on the farm that doesn't need a lot of water, and basically that we can sell and we can set the price for, right? So it costs so much money to raise a cactus and we can sell it for that much money. Our cattle and our beef are not the same way. It costs us a certain amount to raise an animal, but we don't get to determine how much it costs at McDonald's at all. And so we needed to grow something that was more of a better income for the ranch, so that, like my son, we still have the ranch when he gets old enough to run it. Now, the second part of that question is that everybody loves saguaro cactus. And so they're a good thing to sell. So we could sell more cactus than we can grow. And so we decided growing them because the fact that we didn't want to harvest all of the cactus that we had on the range, and you can only take them from private property. That's it. And so we didn't want to take all of those cactus off of our mountains and our rangeland because they take so long to grow. And so we decided we would start growing them ourselves so that we could replace them, right? And so if we harvest one off the range, we can either replace it with one here, or we can just sell these that are on the farm. And so there's a high demand, which means lots of people want cactus and more people want to buy them than what we can even grow.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned it in your video clip, but someone wants to know, how do the cactus survive if rodents and other creatures are trying to snack on the cactus? What do you guys do to keep those things away, or are there natural defenses the cacti have?
Well, they have some natural defenses, right? Because they could just poke at you and that makes it harder for things to eat them. But when it comes to the bugs and the fungus and the bacteria, you know, they're not afraid of spines, cactus spines. And so what we have to do is we have to use certain types of pesticides, right? Which those are basically chemicals that we put on the plant, which take care of some of those bugs, right? So and naturally that doesn't happen. And so all of those cactus would just die. And so, but the ones that we're growing, we're able to keep them alive because we're able to beat back some of those bugs. Not all bugs are bad. Let me tell you something really interesting that you're all going to go, ew. So we have thousands of black widows that live in the greenhouses. And, you know, do all of you know what a black widow is? It's sometimes it's a scary spider that your parents tell you to stay away from. Well, on the greenhouses, we don't kill the black widows. We don't kill any of them. In fact, we like them because they're a natural way of controlling some of those bugs. And so the black widows eat those other bugs that kill our cactus. And so on the greenhouses, they're kind of our partner. And so we also control bad things that way. And then we have someone that works there, and we have people there all the time that keep track of the rodents. We trap some of the little mice that eat the roots. So we trap the mice and we keep track of things that attack the cactus. So it's a full-time job. Great question, because it takes a lot of work to keep the cactus alive.
And I like this question. So we know that rodents and insects and fungi like to chew on cactus. What about people? Can people eat cactus?
People can eat cactus, but it depends on what kind of cactus, right? And it depends on the part of the cactus. So you can make saguaro jelly. So the fruits that grow on the very top of a saguaro, they're red, and you see the white flower first, right, in the spring, and then you see this big red fruit. So lots of people knock those fruits off and they make cactus jelly out of them. And so lots of people like to use cactus jelly. Wildlife loves saguaros. They live inside of them. They use them to get water because the saguaro holds tons of water, tons and tons of water. And so wildlife, the birds nest in the saguaros and they get the water out of them. So super important to wildlife. Prickly pear cactus, people eat prickly pear cactus. And so that's important for a lot of folks, especially it's kind of a delicacy more in Mexico than it is here. But you can absolutely eat cactus if you prepare it correctly, and wildlife eat lots of cactus.
I love this next set of questions. I'm going to pair them together. So one question is, what can you compare the spines on a cactus to, the sharpness? And two, how then do you guys move these cactus from pot to pot, or when you're moving them at the end without getting stabbed by the cacti?
Two very good questions. Saguaro needles can be, they're very pokey, right? And they have big needles that you see that you can be like, oh, and you get away from. And then they have really tiny little needles that you can't see very well. And those are the ones that kind of get you. But I will tell you, remember when we were talking about the tools of a cowboy and the shaps? Super important, because if a saguaro needle pokes into you, it has a little kind of toxin on the needle. And when it gets into your skin, it hurts a lot. And it's hard to pull out. Some cactus have little barbs on them. Barrel cactus, they'll have little barbs. And so if they get into you, it's a defense mechanism, right? That's how they keep animals away, because the animals learn right away. Stay away from that cactus. People, we don't learn right away sometimes, right? And so the needle will get in you. It's hard to get out. And then once you pull the needle out, that toxin stays in your skin. And sometimes, like my husband, when he's moving the cactus, the big ones, which you'll see a picture of, he got a saguaro needle in his knee, right below his kneecap. And he couldn't really walk for like a week and a half because it hurt so badly from the needles. So you be very respectful of saguaro needles. And what was the other? Oh, I know what the other question was. So how do we move them because of this? So when they're really tiny, so the ones that you see on the right-hand side of the screen there, when they're really tiny, we put tape on the edges of our fingertips, right? Pieces of tape. And then you pick up the saguaro with the tape and the needles stick to the tape, and then you put them in the next container, right? So when they're really small, that's what we have to do. And then just as they get bigger, you can maneuver them from the bottom. We wear gloves and we maneuver them from the bottom and just pick them up very gently. But it's a really hard job and it's really slow. And so it's, you know, it's not one of those jobs that a lot of people want probably, but but it's doable. And then I'll explain, if there's not any other questions on this slide, Katie, I'll explain that. So what you're seeing here are different ages and sizes, right? And then on the left-hand part of your screen, you'll notice those look a little bit different. Those are actually barrel cactus, and they're called golden barrels. And so they have this really pretty yellow tint to their spines. And so a lot of people like to have those in their yards for landscaping. And so we also grow barrel cactus. And so you'll see those there, and then you'll see the different sizes of the saguaros. And so they just get bumped into a bigger pot. And so they get a little bit bigger, and then we bump them into another pot, and then another pot. And then, like I said, eventually until they get moved outside. And then the ones you see on your bottom right-hand screen, those are growing all close together. And so those we need to move pretty soon because each one gets their own pot.
We had an interesting question about water. Do you, and it might change versus how you guys are growing them versus them growing out in the wild or nature, but what is the least amount of water that a cacti needs to survive? Is it gallons? Is it quarts?
That's a hard question because, again, it just depends on the cactus. It depends on where it's growing. Even a cactus that's out in the wild, you know, a lot of saguaros, they need what's called a nursery plant. And so what that would be is like a different type of tree, like a mesquite tree or a palo verde tree. So if you're out in the desert and you look, the best place to find a baby saguaro is underneath one of those trees because it provides a lot of protection. Because even though it's a cactus and it lives in the desert, it can still sunburn. And it also is able to collect some of that water that's running off of the tree into the cactus. So it really just depends on the cactus. Our cactus in the wintertime, we water very little. And so maybe once a week we'll go through with the sprayer like you would like in your lawn, you know, if you're holding one of those sprayers that just, and so in the winter we will do that once a week or once every 10 days because cactus get fungus very easily and they have to be able to dry out. So you'll see in those pots, all those little rocks, it's very sandy soil so that when we do water them, the water goes through very quickly. So a cactus can survive for a really long time without water. Is it healthy? Not really. But that's the way the desert plants exist, right? They're adapted to survive with very little water. And then as soon as they get water, they just come alive and they recover. So it really just depends, but they can survive with very little water. But the healthier you want them, you really have to control when they get the water and how much. In the summertime, when it's super hot in the greenhouses, we water them every day.
And one of the questions, so I'll get ready to move to the next slide, which is where you have a video play. But the question is, how long does it take to see the difference in sizes? How long does it take to move from this greenhouse to the one that they're going to see in just a moment?
Well, again, I hate to say it, but it just depends. There's just a lot of variability. Since we're the first ones doing this, we are learning like everyone else. And so you'll even see in those pictures, do you see how some of those cactus on the lower left where Katie has the arrow, do you see how some of them are twice the size of the other ones? Well, they were transplanted at the same time and they were planted from seed at the same time. And so you'll just see those seeds could have come from the same saguaro even. And when we planted them, they're growing at different rates. And so just in general, I would say that it takes about a year to a year and a half to bump up to the next pot. But the bigger the cactus get, the faster they start to grow. So once they get to be about 6 to 8, 10 inches, they'll start growing faster and it won't take as long to bump them up. But when we first started from seed, you know, a little seedling could take up to 2 years to be planted to the next pot. So it really just depends. And we're learning a lot, just like everyone else.
Excellent.
So now we're in the greenhouse where after this, each greenhouse, the saguaros get a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, and they get bumped in a bigger pot and then a bigger pot and then a bigger pot. So now we're in the greenhouse where they're almost out, right? So in one more bump, they'll be put outside and they'll be planted in the ground, which we showed you before. So you can see they're getting pretty big now. And it's taken between 3 and 4 years for them to get to this size from a seed, which because we water them is pretty fast. Out in the natural world, if they were just out in the desert, they wouldn't be nearly this big yet.
So we had a question come in kind of about the cactus, but more to do with the spiders. And that is, you know, you mentioned in the greenhouse, there were a lot of black widows, and you actually like that they're there because they eat some of those harmful insects. But what do you do if a black widow spider bites you? And have you ever been bit by one of the black widows?
I have never been bit by the black widow. My daughter, who is 17 now, she worked in the greenhouse last summer and she was very afraid of the black widows. And so she was super, super careful. And if you're super, super careful, you don't get bit. But our manager, who manages the whole farm up there, he gets bit 2 or 3 times a year. And so, you know, basically he just pays attention to the bite and makes sure that it doesn't get, you know, infected or get worse, but he's never had to go to the doctor for it. And he's probably built up a little immunity to the bites now, just like a beekeeper does. And so, but we respect the spiders. We're very careful with them.
So now we're up on the mesa, and this is where we have all of the cactus planted. So you saw some of them earlier, but basically we have covered this entire mesa with little tiny cactus that we bumped out of the greenhouses and we brought out here. And you'll see there's even some way out there on the video on that next mesa up there. But you can only plant cactus in certain places. That's why they only grow in certain places naturally, on certain slopes and at certain elevations. So we would never be able to plant these cactus bottom where the fields are, they wouldn't survive because it would be too cold. And so just up here on this little tiny mesa, just that little bit of difference is all they need to stay just warm enough in the winter that they don't freeze.
So I don't know if you see it yet.
So this,
There you go.
yep. So this is a picture of one of the really big old cactus that's right next to the cactus farm, and it's up above our irrigation field. So when I said we could never plant cactus down in that field, that's because it's too cold. So you just go up a little tiny hill and it's warm enough. And so Katie and I wanted to take a picture of this cactus so you can just see the huge difference between what we're growing and what nature has grown. And those two cactus there could easily be 100 years old.
So this is a typical mesquite tree in Arizona. And obviously we have lots and lots of mesquite trees here. Now, for us, mesquite are something that sort of annoys us, okay? Because they use a lot of water. So they have a root system that goes really far, a tap root that goes really far down into the ground. And then they have a lot of roots that go out this way. And so a mesquite tree can get water in the desert no matter what. And they grow really close together and they grow really fast, and there are lots and lots of them. So what happens is you'll get a lot of mesquite trees together, and then you won't get any grass that grows underneath them. And so that's why ranchers sometimes really don't like mesquite very much. And so when we make a farm field or something like that, we clear a lot of mesquite. And over 100 years ago, there weren't that many mesquite down here in the bottom of the valley. Now there's lots. And so we're always kind of fighting with those trees so that we can get grass to grow up and open up the trees a little bit. So one thing we started doing here at the ranch, well, let me back up. So probably about 80 years ago, Andy's grandfather started making charcoal out of the mesquite because we got to find something else to do with all this mesquite. And so we made charcoal and bagged it and hauled it all the way to California. That's a horrible job making charcoal, very messy. So now what we do with the mesquite is we take the older mesquite, and most of the time they're dying because now we want them to get, some of them to get big, like this trunk right here. This trunk right here will be run through the mill now. So it's been cut to a size where they want to start working from it, and they'll run it through the mill and they'll make boards out of it. And so we'll make mesquite board lumber, and I'll walk right over here so you can get an idea of how big this trunk is. This is a pretty big tree. This one is pretty old. And then right over here is the mill. And this is a really small little mill. This is like a private mill. You can hook it up to the back of your truck and you can drive it somewhere else. And so we don't own this mill. This mill is owned by a friend of ours who mills all of the mesquite for us. And he's an expert in all of that. So he puts the trunk on there and then he moves this, turns it on, and then he moves the mill down and it slices through the mesquite. Now mesquite is one of the hardest woods that you can work with. And so this machine goes through a lot of blades, and people who make furniture and different things that we'll show you in just a minute, sometimes they don't like mesquite either. They love the way it looks and it's beautiful, but it's really hard to work with because it's such a hard wood and it's bad on the saw blades. So now we sell mesquite lumber, and we're making another use of a renewable resource here on the ranch.
We actually have a question about the mesquite already. How come mesquite take a lot of water?
Well, mesquite trees are called phreatophytes, which is a big word, but those are trees that can basically take, it's a survival mechanism, right? And so mesquite grow in places where there's not very much moisture. And so they are a kind of a bully, in my opinion, sometimes in nature, because they can get the water when nobody else can get the water. So right now in Arizona, even though we haven't had hardly any rain all year, the mesquite are still able to get water. And you can tell right now they have green leaves because they still have water stored in their trunks. And so they just have those deep tap roots so they can get water that's deep. And they have the roots that go out to the side so they can take advantage of any water right away that rains, like hopefully it's going to do in the next couple of days. And so they're smart. They really survive. They can take advantage of any water. So
what are the pictures they're seeing now?
Okay, so I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to go through these pretty quick. So this is the actual lumber. So you saw the picture of the trunk, right? That was on the ground. So when the lumber goes through, we do what's called rough cut lumber. It's not like what you would buy at Home Depot. So people who buy our lumber have to really know how to work with wood and have a lot of tools themselves, right? So the picture on the left is what we call kind of decorative fancy lumber. And so people will buy those to make weird tables, and they don't do much to them. They just varnish them, and sometimes they'll put turquoise in the cracks and stuff, and you'll see those in fancy furniture stores. And then on the right are stacks, just like a lumber yard. So stacks of different sizes of mesquite. And so people will come in and they'll say, well, I need this many, what's called board feet. That's how you measure lumber. And so I need this many board feet of mesquite because I'm going to make a table, or I'm going to do cabinets, or I'm going to do flooring. And so they determine what size they're going to buy. So those mesquite in the top right hand picture that are really big slabs of wood, right, and very thick, those would be like what you would use to make a really big door on a fancy house or a big table, dining room table. And so that's who we sell our mesquite to. And then these next pictures are just fun things that you can use the mesquite for. So we have an artist who mills these bowls. He makes these bowls by hand, and he buys our mesquite, and then he makes these beautiful salad bowls with the mesquite. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see stairs. So these stairs are actually in my house. And so when we added stairs to our house and those beams that are up above, we milled the mesquite from our own ranch. And then we had somebody smooth it out, and then we laid it down on the floor and made stairs out of our own ranch mesquite. So, and the one thing I really wanted to point out before we end today, it's been so much fun telling you guys all about our home and our business and what we do for a living and where we live, is that we do a lot of things. Like, I don't know how many of, if I was standing in your classroom right now, I'd say, raise your hand if you thought a ranch grew cactus and was a farm and milled mesquite and did all these things. I bet most of you would say, no, I thought ranchers just had cows, right? And so nowadays, you really have to do a lot of different things on a ranch or a farm to stay in business, because farming and ranching is really hard. And you never really know if you're going to be able to, if you'll get enough money for your cows to pay your people that work for you, or pay for different things. And so in farming and ranching, we try to grow lots of different things and sell lots of different things so that we can stay in business. Because again, my son is the 6th generation. And so for our family, the most important thing is that he be able to take over the farm and ranch when he's ready, and that he have lots of opportunity and lots of chances to do what he wants to do with the farm and ranch, just like his great-great-great-grandfather did before him. And the only way we can do that is to make sure that when beef prices are really, really low, so if you go to the grocery store and you only have to pay 99 cents for a pound of hamburger, that's great for you, and we're happy about that, but it makes it kind of hard for us. And so then we have saguaro. So then maybe we sell the saguaros, and that helps us pay for the ranch. So we diversify. That's the word that we use in agriculture, is to diversify our operation. And it also helps us manage the natural resources so that when we don't have a lot of water, we can focus on our cactus, right? And not farm as much. And so it helps us be responsible with the water and the soil and the different resources that we use.
All right, I'm going to actually make you big here, Miss Stephanie. That way they can see you. While we answer any more questions. Oh, interesting. Okay, so somebody would like to know, I don't know if you can share this, how much does the cactus and the mesquite sell for on the ranch?
Sure. So in any kind of business, there's the people that make the stuff, right? And then other people take those things and make them into something else, then they make them into something else, right? And so we're at the bottom of that pyramid, right? So we make the meat or we grow the cactus, right? And so most of the time we don't sell directly to the customer who's the final person to get that product, right? We're at the bottom. And so that means we sell it for the least. And then by the time it gets to the store, like Target or Fry's, you know, if you're talking about our wood or anything like that, by the time it gets to the store where you buy it, lots of other people have done things to it and they've added a price to it, right? So for our price on the saguaros, we charge about $30 a foot. Okay. But if you went to the landscape into, let's see, I'm trying to think of like Home Depot, you know, or someplace where you buy nursery plants, where your parents go and they buy a tomato plant. Once you go there, they're going to charge you more like $60 a foot or $65 a foot. And so it's very important to understand that what you pay in the grocery store or in the Home Depot or whatever is not nearly what the farmer or the rancher got paid for it, because we have the raw product or the seedling, right? And so then for the mesquite, we sell it, that really varies. That would be hard to explain because a little board, little tiny board costs a lot less than those really big boards. Those big boards that you saw that were about that thick and about that wide, those are, you know, sell for like $12 a board foot, which I know is hard to understand because it's not a measurement that people usually use. But, you know, one big board like that that's 10 or 12 feet long, you know, is going to cost you, you know, like 85 or 90 bucks. So, and then you got to pay the guy who's going to build the door, right?
So to follow up on that, one, do you direct market sell any of your cacti? And two, where is it that they can get the wood from?
Okay, so we don't, all of our cactus, we have an agreement because we're farmers. We don't want to advertise. We don't want to have to put up billboards in town, you know, all that stuff that everybody does that sells stuff. So we sell all of our cactus to one company and it's called, I don't know if there's anybody on the Zoom call today from Tucson, but if you're from Tucson, you might know the name Savannos. And so all of our cactus gets sold to that company and then they sell our cactus to people with their houses or their businesses. So you kind of have to go through them to buy our cactus. And then the mesquite you buy directly from us. And so if you want to buy different mesquite boards, you call us or you go to our website and get our phone number. And that's carlinkranch.com. And you can buy direct on our mesquite.
And we have a teacher who would like to know if they can visit the farm. Do you ever do field trips at your farm?
You know, when my kids were younger, Katie and I have known each other for a very long time. And for 10 years, we did field trips for fourth graders for the local community here. And so we used to do lots of field trips then, and we were more set up for field trips, which doesn't mean we wouldn't do a field trip now. You know, if you go through Katie and we could figure it out. It's just not something we've done for a while because we did it for 10 years and our kids are older now and they don't go to the same school anymore. But we love to show people our farm and ranch, which is so great about this Zoom call because lots of, you know, there are more people I think on this call than we could ever have at one time on our farm. And so that's what's neat about this technology and kind of a bright spot of what's going on in the world. But we love to show people our farm and ranch. So it would have to be something we would set up special, but we do like to, you know, for people to see what we do on farms and ranches, you just have to plan ahead.
And we do have a couple more questions. So if your question's already been answered and you want to go, feel free to pop off, but we'll keep answering the questions for those of you who have posted them here. And so one of the classes wants to know, you keep referring to that you guys are one of the first ones to do that with cactus, to grow cacti. What do you mean by that?
So that's a great question. So what I mean by that is we are the first farm in the Sonoran Desert in the United States, right? Because saguaros only grow in the Sonoran Desert. There are saguaros that grow in Mexico in the Sonoran Desert, but in the United States, They really are only in Arizona. And so we are the only farm that cultivates saguaros, which means we take the seed, we plant it in the ground or in the pot in this case, and then we keep growing it until it gets bigger and bigger. There are some people that kind of grow some cactus, you know, a few here and there, like nurseries in Phoenix and stuff. They'll have a little greenhouse where they'll grow, you know, 50 saguaros or something. But at the scale that we're growing them, we're the only ones doing it. And I'll tell you, it's because it's really hard and it takes a really long time. And so you have to grow them in a very specific place. You have to have enough room to do that. We are learning the stuff we've learned. A lot of people don't know because it's been trial and error. We lose a lot of cactus every year because we have to learn new things about the soil and the fertilizer and the bugs. And so most people don't want to put that much effort into something that's going to take a really long time to get your money back.
Now, when we go back to the cacti and the arms, you know, there's a lot of rumor out there that, oh, if it has one arm, it's 100 years old. One, is there any truth to that? Is there really a length of time, how long it takes for a saguaro to get an arm? And do you know how many arms a saguaro can get?
Wow, good questions. So there are a lot of books out there that say very, you know, pointedly or specifically, oh, it takes 30 years to get an arm on a saguaro. Well, I don't know how anybody knows that because I don't know anybody that sat and watched one saguaro for 30 years to see when it got an arm. So I think the better answer is, again, it just depends. The saguaro I have in my backyard that gets runoff from my house grew an arm in about 10 years. One that's out in the wild that basically doesn't get any runoff. And if we're in a drought, which we have been for the last 20 years, there could be a lot of saguaros out there that are, you know, 30 years old and still don't have an arm. So it really just depends. If you buy a saguaro and you plant it in your front yard and you take care of it the way that you should, you'll get an arm probably, you know, in about 10 years. So it just depends.
And how long have you guys been growing the cacti there on your ranch? When did you start this part of your operation?
So we started growing Saguaro cactus in about, let me think, 2000, I want to say 2007. Around 2007, 2006, we started planting the seeds. And we're just now getting to the point where we can sell the cactus that are in the greenhouses, which that reminds me, there was a picture, I'm not sure if I missed it, but we did have a picture of a big saguaro that was about 12 feet long and it was wrapped in carpet. And in that picture, you can see those are the saguaros that we harvest off of our rangeland, right? Because we've been doing this project for many, many years and we have to earn money to pay for all those greenhouses, right? So we sell big cactus off of our private land. We wrap them in carpet, old used carpet, one at a time, and we haul them into town like that. And I can't remember why I started talking about this, but but it's interesting to know that we also sell those kind of cactus.
And how many people do you guys have working there on the ranch with the cows, the cacti, and the mesquite?
So in total, we have about 10 people that work for the Carlink Ranch, and they all have different jobs. Everybody that works here has to be able to help with everything at some point, but most people do the same kind of job every day, whether that's something with farming, something with the cattle, something with irrigating. So we have 10 different people.
Excellent. Well, it looks like that wraps up many of the questions, and we are moving on to the 10 o'clock hour. So I know some of our classes and students need to continue on. But Stephanie, thank you so much for spending some of your morning with us and teaching us about Carlink Ranch and how you guys have been able to diversify, doing not only cattle, but cactus and mesquite. Based on all of the questions that we had This is probably the most amount of questions we've had on a tour, which means that they are very, very interested in it. So again, thank you for spending the time with us this morning. For all of you that are still on or were on with us today, we will be sending out an email to your teachers later today that has the link to today's recording, so you can see any parts that you missed. So everybody have a wonderful week, and Stephanie Smallhouse, thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.